Good morning, everyone. I got my I know that's backwards. Got my hustle juice on this morning. Coffee, what a delight. What a delight this morning. I hope everybody had a good I didn't come on Monday. Monday was Memorial Day in the US. Memorial Day is when we honor those who died in wars in the US, and it's a long weekend. And besides sort of ceremonial stuff that happens, many people, it's sort of an unofficial start to summer. I know it's not technically good morning. I know it's not astronomical summer yet, but I live in Maine, which is a huge tourist area for especially in the summer. And to see the amount of foreign license plates coming into the area, not foreign, but I mean from out of state anyway. Oh, good morning to you. Greetings, greetings. And I love your handle, Sunstar and Spirit. It's beautiful. Um, so I hope everybody had a good weekend. And if you are in the if you're in the States, I hope you had a good Memorial Day. I sure did. Spent time with loved ones and barbecued, which is a traditional. I think it's like a law here. You have to barbecue, that sort of thing. And my girls came with their boyfriends, and we had just had a good time. And actually, that was on Sunday. Memorial Day itself was a little rainy and stuff, but it was still nice. And so I didn't do one of these on Monday, so I'm doing this today. So happy Wednesday to everybody. Um, good morning, and you are so welcome. Today, oh my gosh, my dog, I hate having to do this. I'm sorry. I got to get up and let my dog out. She waited until I got on. She's like, "Here's me talking." And then she's like, "So, I'm going to be away from my camera for about 15 seconds maybe. My apologies. I'll be right back." I'm not going away permanently, I promise. I'm just letting my dog out. You can go. There you go. Sorry about that. I realized that it might seem unprofessional, but hey, what are you going to do? I work from my home. My animals have needs. I have needs. Today, I'm going to I'm talking about sacred intimacy. I'm going to talk about a lot of things with regard to intimacy. I am going to talk about sex. If you're offended by sex, I'm sorry. Um, yeah, well, my dog first got me up at 4:30. And now she's like, "Oh, you're talking. Must be time for me to go out and smell the flowers." She like goes out. Sometimes she just goes out and sits on the lawn and like looks around. I get it. I would do that too if I didn't have other things to do. I would just go out and sit and look and observe. But yeah, I was up at 4:30 this morning with my pup. Um, she's demanding. The animals are demanding. What are you gonna do? My daughter's about to graduate. Both of them are about to graduate high school in a few days. It's very exciting. So anyway, today I'm talking about sacred intimacy, or how I'm going to define intimacy the way that I see what intimacy is. I am going to talk about sex. So if you're offended by sex, I apologize. You can drop off or whatever. Go watch somebody else. Um, obviously, I can't talk about it in ways that violate terms of service and any of the streaming platforms I'm on. But it's important to touch upon it. And I'm going to talk about self intimacy and spiritual intimacy, and why, for me anyway. Um, yes, I practice shamanism and meditation and all kinds of things, but really my path is about mysticism. And maybe I can demystify mysticism a little bit. That seems contradictory, doesn't it? But mysticism is about elevating one's consciousness, basically, to be closer to source, closer to divinity. And you cannot do that without intimacy. Um, that doesn't and intimacy doesn't automatically mean sex. It can, but it doesn't automatically mean that. So what usually like when I choose a topic to speak about, um, the usually there's something that sparks why I want to talk. It's like something happens or I encounter something or somebody asks me a question or I see something and I'm like, yeah, I'd like to talk about that. And so today is not an exception to that. So today, um, yesterday, as I am wont to do, I often will, I will watch other people who discuss spiritual topics on YouTube or whatever. And there's a channel on YouTube I absolutely love, highly recommend it. Very academic, so not practical spirituality, but very academic approaches. I can't remember the name of the person, but it's called Esoterica, and he talks about all kinds of things. And yesterday, I was watching a video where he was talking about Mechthild of Magdeburg. Mechthild of Magdeburg was a 13th century German woman, um, we think born to a somewhat noble family, probably not, not like royal. Oh, you like this? You like, yeah, very great channel. If you're nerdy like I am, it's a great channel. And he'll often discuss, books and all kinds of different topics from Kabbalah to mysticism. It's a very Western perspective, but that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that that's what his expertise is in. And so he was talking about Mechthild of Magdeburg, who was a Christian mystic, as one would be if one grew up in, unless you were a Jewish mystic, but you growing up in 13th century Germany. So we think she was of somewhat noble birth, probably lower end of the nobility, some sort of, wealthy family, whatever, but not highly educated individual. Um, did not read or speak Latin, and in fact, in her writings, is sometimes sort of like, I wish I could speak. I wish I could speak and write Latin, which would have been part of a formal education at that time, Latin and Greek. And probably not a lot of women got that in those days. Not a lot of men either. You had to be fairly wealthy to get a formal education or be in the church or something like that. So anyway, so she's growing up in a time where Catholicism was basically the only form of Christianity in that area, and she leaves home at some point as a young woman and joins an order called the Beguine or Beguine. Um, she's not a nun, so this is a religious order of women, but they don't take vows as nuns, but they are celibate and they are they are doing they're doing works, and sometimes they run afoul of the church. Like back then, even if you were um very outwardly Christian or whatever, anything that smacks of heresy could get you burned at the stake, right? You could be Giordano Bruno was a monk, and he was burned at the stake for heresy or whatever. I think probably for saying that the earth went around the sun, but he was also practicing alchemy and other things. Um, so anyway, it is amazing to me, knowing what I know about Mechthild, that she was never burned at the stake and her book was never burned. Um, she was, as a woman, having incredibly mystical experiences and writing them down, right? And you can find and purchase her book. It's called The Flowing Light of the Godhead. The Flowing Light of the Godhead. And you can buy copy. I own a copy of it. You can buy copies of it on Amazon for $20 or something. Translations, obviously. She spoke what they called like Low Middle German or something like that. And we don't have her original writings, but we have translations. We have translations. It was translated from one form of German into another, and then into Latin, and then eventually somebody translated it into English. Here's the thing. So she lived, I don't know how old she was. She lived to a pretty ripe old age. She was living in, in amongst this order, and she got sick. She was, she became blind and nearly deaf, and there wasn't a lot of medical treatment back then. Um, but she was being taken care of by an order of nuns who treated her as a relic. Now that is significant. Relics, if you have any idea about Christian mysticism, relics are actually like body parts of deceased saints, right? Or pieces of the true cross, or the tooth of a one of the three wise men, something along those lines, right? There was no such thing as a living relic except for her. She was treated as a living relic. Why, we don't 100% know, other than her visions, her writings were so influential. They were so and she wrote down everything. Her book's very thick. Um and she was writing in a combination of prose and poetry at the time, and she was trying to be poetic, and her writing is really beautiful. Her visions, her spiritual experiences, which were almost daily for her for decades, um were highly erotically charged. In fact, she very plainly writes about, having sex with Christ, basically, and probably, in any Western European language, was probably the first woman ever to describe an orgasm in writing. Um, Not using that word, of course, but very plain from what she's writing that this is occurring. So how is this happening? She's living in a celibate order. She talks about these visitations where the spirit comes upon her. I mean, we don't 100% know what was going on with her physically, right? Maybe there was some solo sex, or maybe there was something with other members of her order, or maybe it was spontaneous and it happened as part of a mystical experience. But her writing, I can't, it still, it baffles my mind that her book was not burned, right, during that time. Like anything even slightly heretical would have been burned along with its author. That's how we treated people back in those days. But she writes of an intimacy in such poetic language that it's really, really beautiful. So, if you're interested in reading it, there, you have to understand there's stuff in there that is from that time, from that epic. She talks about the Jews in a way that you know German Christians in the 13th century might talk about them, but probably not as bad as other writers of the time. So you have to understand that and place that into that context. It would be shocking today, and like, how could this person be a mystic? And it's also coming through a Christian, a Catholic, a 13th century Catholic Christian lens. So all of those things. But I'm of the opinion we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't discard the entire thing because there's some pieces of it that are um, objectionable, right? Um, we still read Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, even though there's language in there that would be objectionable today, and we understand it in the context of the time, and we can explore what's objectionable about that and be better for it, right? So we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. At least I don't. I don't think that's a great idea or a great thing to do. So, anyway, it struck me that, this person was describing some experiences that I personally, I won't get into that in too much detail because nobody probably wants to hear about that, but experiences that I've been through personally, and, have been really deep, very spiritual experiences. So let's talk about intimacy. Oh, and another, most people are at least have heard of or somewhat familiar with the Sufi poet Rumi, who's writing this beautiful love poetry, but it's very clear he's not writing to a human lover, he's writing to the divine. When he talks about his beloved and getting lost in his beloved and all of these things, he's having a very intimate experience with the divine. And that's so similar, in a similar light. And that's from a Sufi perspective. And if you don't know, Sufism is a mystical arm, a mystical branch of Islam. There are mystics in every spiritual tradition. Um, so mystics are those who are very intimate with God or spirit or source or Allah or Brahman or whatever name you want to slap on the divine. I don't get caught up in the too much in the name game. Usually I will use the word source because it's neutral. There's so much crap out there about, do you worship God or do you worship Hindu gods or do you worship Allah or do you worship? It's like saying, my kids call me dad. People who know me call me John. Like I'm still the same dude, um, but different labels for the same thing, for the divine. Yeah, Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon is extremely erotic. Yep, absolutely. Um, yeah, yes, the Song of Solomon, a book from the Bible, is quite erotic in nature. So at some point in time, sexuality and spirituality went in opposite directions, and they said, in some respects, particularly in Christianity, um, most sexuality became equated with sin and will get you in hell really fast, right? So sex outside of marriage, adultery, same sex relationships, anything like that. Anything, and a lot of rules came later. So the reason we have missionary position sexually is that missionaries were going out into the world, to indigenous cultures and finding out that they were having all kinds of different sexual experiences, and they're like, "Oh no, this is terrible. Clutch my pearls. Let me teach you literally teach you a different, teach you this is the only way that sex is okay. And it's only for procreation. Forget the fact that it, is really, saying sex is for procreation is only for procreation is like saying eating, you shouldn't take pleasure in eating, or you shouldn't take pleasure in uh, resting, or you shouldn't take pleasure in any of these things because that's not their purpose. That's just an excuse for people who want to make sex really taboo. So, intimacy, let's talk about that. Let me define what I mean by intimacy. And again, like I will often define my terms just so we're on the same footing. So that you have a better understanding of what I mean when I say it, not because you need to adopt my, not dogmatic like that. You don't need to adopt my definitions or meanings for anything. But intimacy is about connection and closeness. That's it. So if we are intimate as human beings, we can be intimate friends. That doesn't necessarily mean we're having sex, although sex and intimacy sometimes in English become interchangeable. Oh, we were intimate, right? But it just means that we are really close. So I can be intimate with you. We could be intimate sexually. We could be intimate as friends. We could be intimate as teacher and student, right? It means we drop our defenses and we have a connection that is beyond intellectual, it's emotional, and it's close. We have a very close relationship. So I can have an intimate relationship with source, with spirit, right? By really getting to know spirit, by dropping my defenses and by connecting with spirit. And that's where mysticism comes in, or prayer or meditation or all of those things, right? Hi, if you're just joining, welcome, welcome. We can also have self-intimacy, and that sounds a little strange sometimes. And I'm not just talking about masturbation, but that can be part of it, certainly. But when I'm talking about when I talk about self-intimacy, I'm talking about a deeper connection with ourselves, a deeper connection with who we are. And I've said previously, like if you want to pray or meditate or act in any sort of spiritual way, more like the way that mystics do, you use your intention and aim that prayer, that meditation, that spiritual practice, you aim it inward as opposed to outward, right? So mystics see they don't just see God or spirit or source out here, it's in here. And this is how I reach it. I reach spirit, I reach source by going inward. And I can only do that if I have a sense of intimacy with myself. And getting intimate with yourself is about peeling back the layers, the defenses, the ego that we have built up over time, right? We all have these layers of ourselves. We have this public image that we present. We have a self concept that we have an idealized self concept that we try to live up to. Like I always, so for me, being a good person, whatever my definition of that is important, right? It's important to see myself in that light as a good person. And so I would like to think that I make efforts to be a good person, to be honest, to be caring, to be compassionate, to help people when I can, that sort of thing. But I'm a human being and I'm fallible and I fall down. And so um times that have been hardest for me are when I fail, when I fail at being a good person because it harms my self image. It runs contrary to the idealized self that I hold. But becoming intimate with myself is going beneath that, all of that self concept, all of that ego. It's about dropping that defenses. Intimacy in a relationship, intimacy with someone else, whether you're in a sexual relationship or not. Again, it only comes in a place where you feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to drop defenses and just open up and just be yourself. And you can think about that in sexual terms as well, right? So, to have sex, generally, you have to take off your clothes with somebody and you have to be in a pretty vulnerable position with that person. There has to be some level of trust or, you know, um, where defenses get dropped. Certainly. And there's a lot going on there. I do think that sexuality can be a path of spiritual exploration that is extremely powerful. And I've talked about sacred sexuality before. Um, uh, Unfortunately, um, my my take is that spirituality got wrapped up, like Western spirituality got really wrapped up by government in the early days, right? So early on in Western spirituality, the religion and government were the same thing, right? There are countries today, in the Middle East, for example, where the Quran is the constitution of the country. There are, we are. There aren't too many Christian theocracies, although there are people who are trying to turn the U.S. into one. There are elected representatives in Congress now who are trying to turn the U.S. into a theocracy. So when that happened, both government and religion became ways to exercise control over the masses, right? They needed to maintain a state. They needed, for better or for worse, really for worse, for a couple thousand years. So they needed to maintain power over people. So what they did was they disempowered people in lots of different ways. For one, anybody who believed slightly different than us, we were going to um, tell them they are heretics and we're going to burn them at the stake. We're going to kill their entire family. The very first crusade was the Albigensian Crusade, and it was not Christians going into the Middle East. It was Christians going into southern France and killing something like 1/3 of the population of southern France, who were also Christian, but practicing Christianity in a different way. And how many wars are there in the Middle East between Sunni and Shiite Muslims, right? They're all reading the same book. They all have the same guy. There is a slightly different perspective on things, and they're killing each other and have been for over 1,000 years, right? So to disempower people, we need to take things away from them like personal revelation. We need to take things away from them like sacred sexuality, which was practiced in temples. There were temple, in many different areas of the world, there were temple prostitutes. There were temple sexual practices. There were, because prior to this patriarchal stuff that came up around, the Roman Empire and et cetera, et cetera. There were people were allowed to become mystics. The general populace could go to a mystery school and drink, holy brew, which was infested with ergot fungus that would, basically LSD, and have a personal experience of divinity. But what happened was when religion got codified in, between the 4th and 7th centuries, they're like, no, you can't have that. You can't have that. You can't have that. Everything has to come through the hierarchy, the pyramid, right? Comes down from the guy at the top to the guys under them, to the guys under them, to the guys under them. And then the general populace, you're not even allowed to read the holy book. We're not even, it's going to be another 1,000 years or so before we translate it into any language that you can read. So you have to come to us for all your knowledge and all your connection. And if you connect personally with divinity, you run the risk of being put to a very violent, very painful death. Very happy hump day to you. Happy Dunny Hump Day. What's Dunny Hump Day? Oh, sunny. I thought there was something I missed. Oh, yes, it's very sunny. Speaking of which, I apologize again. Now I have to let my dog in. Give me just a brief moment here. I'll be away from the camera for a brief moment. Oh, sorry about that. That'll only happen 15 more times in the next hour. Where it is such a nice sunny day, my dog will want to go sit on the lawn and stare at people, or animals or birds. Power to her, because I would too. Oh yeah, the autocorrect. I'm terrible at typing. Especially using my thumb. I have the funniest, worst typos frequently when I'm typing stuff in. So pretty funny. So anyway, we're talking about sacred intimacy, including sacred sexuality, um, all of that stuff, and we'll get into it deeper and deeper. So again, my definition of intimacy is closeness and connection. So most of us know intimacy through personal relationships, right? We have people that we are intimate with. We have intimate friends. This doesn't necessarily mean we're having sex with them. It just means we're close. We have a connection. We have a deep emotional connection. Oh, yeah. Thursday night at 10:25. Well, thank you for staying up. That would be past my bedtime. I'm an early riser, not necessarily by choice. My dog got me up at 4:30 this morning. It's like, time to go out, time to play. Let's go find the cat. Oh gosh, thank you so much. You're very welcome. So anyway, I come from a tradition of personal revelation. So I practice shamanism. Shamanism is a path of personal revelation. Everything we do is mystical, everything. Shamanism is not a religion. I have friends who are Christian and shamans. I have friends who are Jewish and shamans. I have friends who are Buddhist. I have a friend who's a Zen Buddhist Roshi who practices shamanism. Um, so shamanism is not a religion, it's just a set of tools and practices. And it would be harder if you have certain beliefs. So if you have a belief that people practicing shamanism are devil worshipping sorcerers, for example, and I can assure you that most of us are not, I'm not, that would be pretty hard, probably, unless you wanted to be a devil worshipping sorcerer. um, so there's sometimes where beliefs conflict, but it's pretty rare. But shamanism comes from animism, so we believe that there's spirit in everything, and that's not really that weird if you consider that in the Abrahamic religions of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, God is seen as being omnipresent. So source, spirit, what have you. The Holy Spirit is in everything. Um, and there's passages that might not be what you've been taught or what you believe, um, that sort of thing. And but there are definitely passages in all of the sacred texts that talk specifically about this. In the East, of course, in many places in the East, not everywhere. I don't want to like over stereotype, but I'm thinking of specifically areas where there's like Buddhism and Shintoism and Hinduism. Mysticism is a lot more out in the open, right? And um, there's a greater mix, and historically there's a greater mix of religion. Although there's certainly like in Tibet and Nepal, for example, there were um, not really battles, but the between the Bon religion and the Buddhism that came in, and arguments. We'll put it that way. There are arguments over who is there, who invented who, and who was the deity of this and that, and it's just political stuff. Not all that interested in that perspective, but so let's talk a little bit about how we find intimacy, particularly with ourselves and with spirit, but also with others. And it can be challenging when we bring another person into the equation. Although we long for intimacy, right? We want to be connected with other people. Even you can be introverted, you can be a complete introvert and like a homebody and all of those things, and still long for connection. It's just that you're probably not going to find it in large groups of people or in being extroverted. So I don't want to confuse that either. Um, I happen to be a fairly extroverted person, in case you couldn't tell from me talking all the time on these things. But I happen to be a pretty extroverted person. That just means I get energized by being around people quite a lot. And the people I know and are great friends with who are introverted, need more alone time, and they have to recharge their batteries kind of by being alone. And sometimes that comes with some social shyness, sometimes not. But I always respect when people like, look, I want to come out with you, but I just need to like stay home and rest today. Like, we gotta respect that too. um how do we get how do we become more intimate, particularly with ourselves, particularly with spirit? One, I would say is, um we've got to bypass the intellect a little bit, right? What we think we know about ourselves, which is ego, right? Ego are is the set of stories and beliefs that we hold as true about ourselves, right? So I'm a dad. True or not, that's a story that I hold about myself. But that's not who I am at my core underneath all of this. Yes, this body, this mind produced a couple of kids, a couple of great kids. I love them. Um, and that sort of thing. But going deeply into the spiritual underpinnings of who I am, I have to get beyond that story. Beyond the story, I'm a 52-year-old, dude living in Maine, and da, 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 da. Those are true or not, those are all stories that I tell about myself. And we can get caught up in that identification, that ego, right? And what ego tells us is that I'm a separate being. I'm alone in this. This is who I am, and then there's everything else out here. This is my little world in here, and everything else is out here. But what source says is that I am all of this, and so are you. We are all of this. And all of this is arising spontaneously in consciousness, which is what we really are. There's a word in the Sanskrit word, Satchitananda. I've talked about this before. And it basically means consciousness, existence, and bliss. And it refers to a state in which duality drops away. So, duality is the idea that there's me and there's everything else, right? There's two, me and everything else. Non duality is there is just beingness, there's just consciousness. And well, I might have the experience of being an individual arise in the field of consciousness that I am. Um, that's not all that's not what I am. And there's a great Indian saint that I love, uh, um, Ramana Maharshi, and his entire practice. And he had people flocking from all over the world for his entire life to study with him at his mountainside. And he lived in a mountain in India. Um, his entire practice was just asking the question, "What am I?" over and over and over again. And the idea is not to get an answer out of your prefrontal cortex. Well, I'm a 52-year-old, No, it was to go beneath that. It was to become more self-intimate, right? It was to become more aware, more in touch. It's a feeling sense. Spiritual connection, spiritual experiences often defy words, often can be put into words. We call, you know, people talk about the ineffable, right? The ineffable, it means the unnameable, right? The ineffable name of God, or the ineffable experience of this. Very challenging to put into words, and often requires poetry like Rumi or Mechtild, or whomever, to put it into words that closely approach the experience. Right? When we read a poem that touches us, it's not the surface level of the words that touch us. When we see a piece of artwork that touches us, it is not, the we can analyze a painting. I've done this. I studied as an undergrad. One of the courses I took was aesthetics. Aesthetics, not aesthetics like doing beauty. Trust me, you don't want me doing that. But aesthetics and media. And so looking at, like, analyzing things, analyzing art basically, and media, and that sort of thing. And you can look at things like composition and color and light and all of these things. And I do, because I paint, and so I look at form and how light works and all of these things. But if you've ever really, like, stood in front of a piece of art, I'll never forget, one of my favorite artists. I really love surrealism, right? Surrealism, if you're not familiar, is like artists like Salvador Dali. Most people have seen Salvador Dali paintings, at least in a book or something. So I was a big fan of Salvador Dali for a very long time, and had posters of some of his paintings, and had books of his art and all kinds of stuff. And then I went to the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, which had a huge collection of his work, including a number of his masterworks that I had seen images of. But what I didn't realize is some of these paintings were 12 feet tall. And I can look at a picture of a Dolly painting and go, oh wow, that's, that's really amazing. And it is really going beyond words, because he's channeling unconscious information when he was painting. And he's using dream imagery and breaking down, our ideas of reality. My favorite painter is Magritte, and I've never seen one of his works in person, so I look forward to that someday. Might have to travel to Belgium for that. But went to the Dali Museum and stood in front of one of his masterworks that I had the poster of hanging in my dorm in college, so a million years ago, and was almost struck breathless by by seeing this thing in person. So go see art in person. There's a lesson there. Even if you're struck by how beautiful a picture of a painting is, go see it. Um, One of my favorite places on earth is the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and I could spend the rest of my life in there, to be honest. But when I went to college, our college ID used to get us into the MFA at no charge, which was a beautiful thing. And it was a great place to take dates, as long as your date was sort of into art and that sort of thing. But they've got everything there. They've got Egyptian mummies. They've got swords from. They have a whole room of swords from Japan. Um, uh, they have Georgia O'Keeffe. They've got a whole room of impressionists. My favorite Renoir is. Oh, look at that! What just happened? There was like magical stuff happened on the screen. Oh, I got the number one. Amy the Aquarian just got the #1 gifter badge. Thank you so much for whatever it is that you did that got you that. I appreciate it. It was funny. My screen went all like um, hallucinogenic for a second. I was like, what's in my coffee today? But I'm not just saying this because I love art. I'm saying in part because I love art, but go stand in front of a painting that moves you and have the experience, have a one-on-one experience with this piece of art. You don't have to go to like a big museum. It could be some independent artist that and just stand in front of their painting and soak it in, and don't analyze it, for the love of all things. Um, you do that later if you want. Oh, the composition is, they're using, they broke down the traditional rule of thirds in the composition and the contrast between light and dark, and they're using earth tones here, and nah, eh, don't do that to yourself. Get out of the front of your brain and get way in the back and just have the experience. Oh, you had to take aesthetics too? Yeah. Yeah, it does make you see things differently. Oh my gosh, I had to watch our teacher was really fond of like Freud and sexual imagery, and so we would watch like commercials and Madonna videos, and like over and over and over and over again, and break them down. But yeah, it does. You do learn to see things really differently. So, um, which isn't a bad thing. It's nice to be able to shift out of your our. We have sort of our normal everyday consciousness, and that's a little bit of a misnomer, right? Like we are shifting in and out of different states of consciousness all day. If you like listen to music during the day, your consciousness is shifting to that. And another experience, it doesn't have to be visual art or something, but like listen to a piece of music that really moves you, and let it just wash through you. Quiet your mind down and just experience that. This will give you some sense of intimacy, of what true inner self intimacy is like. We can use art and music and dance, or any form of expression to achieve that, as long as it's something that speaks to you. And art that speaks to me might not speak to you. Other people hate impressionist art, or Dadaist or surrealist art, or um, I'm not a big fan of German expressionism. Some people love German expressionism. Uh, I'm like, This is or brutalism. Having lived in Boston for 20 years, whoever designed the city hall in Boston, like, really wanted people who were working there to be depressed all of the time. Like, I'm not a fan, but some people may love it, and that's fine. If it speaks to you, it speaks to you. We don't have to love the same things. So, which brings me kind of to another topic as well. So, as somebody who's a spiritual teacher, as somebody I happen to be an ordained minister, and ordained in a metaphysical church, which is kind of cool and interesting, because we don't take anything literally. It's great. Uh, I really put forward the idea of sex positive spirituality. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And I would like to see people becoming more sex positive in the world. And all that means, it doesn't mean turn around and you know, drop your values or become anything that you aren't. That isn't it. It's about acceptance. It's about accepting any consensual behavior. That's it. To me, that's what positivity is. Even celebrating any consensual behavior. So um, that means no kink shaming. That means no this is okay and that's not okay. As long as it's consensual behavior, consent is king here. Non-consensual behavior is assault, and you know kids and animals and people who are unconscious cannot consent. We should understand all of those things. But inside the framework of consent, any activity is fine. That doesn't mean it's for you. It's like art, right? If you don't like Salvador Dali, and I love Salvador Dali, that's great. But I shouldn't say you're a terrible human being. How dare you not like Salvador Dali? Or you like try to think of an artist. There aren't too many artists I actually don't. Jackson Pollock. I don't like Jackson Pollock. And in fact, secret here, Jackson Pollock became famous because the CIA, literally true, not a conspiracy theory, public knowledge, the CIA sponsored his art because at the time they were trying to counter Soviet art. And so they found like the craziest thing they could, which was Jackson Pollock, who was just basically spraying paint all over the canvas. And like, let's sponsor some art shows and let's make him really big. And they did. And that's absolute 100% truth. And then people are like, Jackson Pollock's a genius. And maybe, but I don't get it. I don't like it. But that doesn't mean I tell you that you can't like Jackson Pollock. You can. It's totally fine. Yeah. And it wasn't just Pollock, it was a number of artists at the time. It's really one of the reasons why art like that became so big, is that it had there were these at the time secret government Cold War era programs to popularize US artists that the Soviets could not grasp, because Soviet art is very representational, right? Um, Not even, sort of beyond abstract at that point. But yeah, kind of a fun fact about Jackson Pollock art. Um, you know, I paint, sometimes I do abstract work, not really that often, but sometimes I do abstract stuff. And I just look at Jackson Pollock paintings and go, yeah, I don't get it. It doesn't speak to me, but it might speak to you, and that's fine. People can talk about the gesture and all this stuff, and but it's not for me. That doesn't mean it's not for you. So sexuality is the same way. So I openly accept and am happy for whatever makes you happy. That's consensual. Along with that is I support anyone's sexual identity and anybody's gender identity. If you want to be non-binary or trans or cisgender or whatever, great. You do you. You be happy being you. Ultimately, that is love. Right. And I shared a quote on Facebook the other day. I don't have it up in front of me, but it's basically that I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the exact quote, but the beginning of love is accepting people right where they are without trying to mold them into my image of what they should be. Right. And that's how we become more loving. You have, there's differences between you and I. Right? I don't want you to be me. I don't want, we are all the same underneath it all. Where it really counts, we're all the same. But this outward expression of who we are, this individualized expression of who we are, um, I don't want us to be the same. It's great if we have things in common. It's also great if we don't have things in common. We don't have to like the same things. In fact, we probably don't. I'm so strange. I'm such a strange bird, um, that it's interesting. When I was in the dating world, I tried the dating apps, right? And there were a lot of people on there who were like, oh, I need somebody who likes, and they would list 97 things that they liked, and they wanted somebody who liked all of the same things. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, wow, that would be a huge coincidence if you found somebody who is absolutely into everything that you were into. What if we could get together and I just supported what you were into and you supported what I was into, and it didn't have to be the same thing as long as we could come together sometimes, right? Like, I like hikes, maybe you don't like hikes, so maybe you don't go on hikes with me. I like painting, maybe you don't like painting. Maybe you support my painting time. Maybe you're into knitting and I don't know how to knit and it doesn't really interest me. Maybe I support that, right? We don't have to be that compatible. There's this really crazy idea out there that for us to like each other, we have to be so similar. Um, let's celebrate our differences. Oh, thank you. Yes. Um, yeah, absolutely. Let's be different together. Let's be cool. Let's be friends. Let me I have lots of friends that are into lots of different things. If I was like, "Oh, I'm only gonna hang out with people who are into shamanism and painting and love dogs," loving dogs is pretty important, and love dogs, and, I can talk to you about martial arts, and I can talk to you about this, I can talk to you about that. You know the number of people I would overlap with and have in common? 0. 0. I would have to sit alone and stare into space all day and never have a conversation with anybody. And I hope that that comes through, like, even when you come on these lives. I'm not, I will talk because it's the frame of reference that I have. I will talk about my spirituality, but you don't have to believe what I believe. I expect you don't. And I support that. I support that you believe different things. I respect that. I do, like, it is a boundary of mine that people come on here, and respect others and respect other beliefs and that sort of thing. But that's it. That's it. We don't have to. Look at this. I've showed this before. This is one of the best purchases I've ever made. Because I like when I do these, I talk a lot. My coffee gets cold, so now I have a thermal carafe, like a restaurant over here. It's a job for me at IHOP someday. I'm gonna go pour coffee. Although IHOP has carafes on the table, right? I haven't been to IHOP in ages. I love IHOP. This is not. I'm not. This is not a sponsored post. I really love breakfast food, which is funny. I almost never eat breakfast, so it's kind of a treat. Where I live, there are pretty good breakfast places around, or there's a few. Some of them have closed down, unfortunately, but we have some good little, like, mom and pop places that make a really good breakfast. Anyway, that's an intimate detail about me, that I love breakfast food, and what's not to love. Um, and I realize, like, there are people on here from other countries, so breakfast food in the US is can be very, very different from. I spent a lot of time in the Philippines, and breakfast over there. You might have fried eggs, but you're gonna have rice, and there might be fish. And in Ilocos, well, they have this in more than Ilocos, but Ilocos has really good sausages. These little chubby sausages called longanesa. So good. There's another food there that tocino. I don't even know how they make it. It's like candied bacon almost, but like really thick. It's like ham, but coated in some kind of really sweet thing. I've seen it. There are Where I live, there are only a few Asian stores around, and I've seen it like once or twice in an Asian store in a frozen food section, and bought some, of course. Oh man, I've been talking for an hour. I've got to click on this thing to continue. Like, are you still there? Oh, that didn't work. Verification complete. Um, Thoughts on intimacy so that possibly can benefit and can grow from the friction of differences. Challenges of the partner, not always, but if partners can be healthy about it, yes. So intimacy with others can be challenging because um, we have to be able. When you come into a relationship, everybody's bringing their stuff. Everybody's bringing their history, their trauma, their wounds, all of that stuff, right? And that stuff, oftentimes, when we feel safe with another person, that stuff says, "Oh, now it's time to surface." And so that can come out. And if we can understand what's going on there, if we can understand, like, oh, I feel really safe with you, and so all my insecurities are coming to the surface, or my wounds, or my past trauma, or that sort of thing are coming up, and I am not going to project them onto you. I'm going to have a conversation with you, or we're going to work through them, or we're going to talk through them. But intimacy with others, there can be, the old Marvin Gaye song, sexual healing, right? I realize it's just sort of like, that's a thing. Um, Intimacy with another human being, when it is healthy, when it is, both partners can be vulnerable with each other and create a safe space for each other to be vulnerable in whatever context that happens. Healing can take Extreme healing can take place, like really radical, amazing healing can take place if you can be with somebody who can just hold space for you, and who accepts you just as you are, right? And there's this, going back to what actual love is, right? Love is I'm holding you, even with your wounds, even with your insecurities, all of these things that come up. I am just going to hold space for you, right? And sexuality can be a big part of that. So yeah, being intimate with another person can be really powerful, as long as um, as long as it's a good partnership, as long as it has to have a healthy context. Um, I'll talk about that. That's such a Thank you for making that comment. It's such a great point. I might make a whole other talk about it. Breakfast wins in the world. Yes. I don't know, like, between pizza and breakfast, I don't know what my favorite food is. There's a place, shout out to there's a place in, two towns over. There's this tiny little family restaurant called Shoots, Chutes is the name of the family. Shoot is the name of the family that owns it. They have got the most amazing breakfast. And if you go there, when they're open, like, if you go there, you have to get there early, or there's a line literally out the door. People are waiting in the parking lot to get into this place. So good. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that you're enjoying it. And I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you for joining in. Um, and for me, like, this is a really critical and important topic. And uh, I, unfortunately, because of the limitations of the streaming services, I can't talk about things like sexuality as uh, I have to hold back when I talk about, so I don't violate any terms of service and get booted off a platform or something, right? The platforms are really sensitive to this stuff. It's really interesting. Like you can, in the Western culture anyway, like I can have like really, really violent stuff and show that, and it's totally fine. But you show, any sort of sexuality is going to have, just talking about like watching a TV show, right? And I realized we used to have just like PG, R, and NC-17 and rated G and stuff like that. Any sort of sexuality whatsoever is going to get you an R rating or a mature rating on TV or whatever they call it these days, right? Sex is bad. That's the message from our culture. Sex is bad. You can't be exposed to that. Children shouldn't know about sex. Human beings shouldn't have sex. Well, I don't know where all these babies are coming from. Right? And that is a power play. That is about taking power away from people. We can become extremely powerful. We can become healed through sexuality. I fully, openly, honestly believe that. But it starts by being more open about it, not hiding it away like it's like sex is shameful. Oh my gosh, how horrible it is that people have these healthy, beautiful, sustaining, healing activities that they can participate in and then connect in a very deep and intimate way with one another. I'm not saying all sex is that way. I know better, but it can be a very beautiful, healing, spiritual activity. Sex is a very spiritual activity when it's in the right, between the right people, or alone can be a very beautiful activity as well. So just having another little sip. This is hustle juice. Having a little bit of hustle juice. Going to get my hustle on. I'm going to have to drop off momentarily to begin the rest of my day. But just to recap, intimacy, real intimacy, is about closeness and connection. And we can find intimacy with ourselves. We can find a real deep, close connection with our spiritual core, with who we are. Yes, the divine union helps us to be in divine union. Absolutely. I like the French slang for orgasm is le petit mort, the little death, which is in one way amusing because I have been through a shamanic initiation ceremony called the Little Death. An initiation, spiritual initiation, is about death and rebirth. And we can have that. We can be in union with spirit, but it's about finding that intimacy. And we can be intimate without sex. Like, yeah, I've talked a little bit about sex here today, and I'll talk more about it in the future. Like, I really want to normalize talking about sex in healthy ways in a spiritual context. That's kind of an important part of what I do. And part of that is that, I have clients. I have to be careful because I don't ever give identifying information away about my clients or my students, but I have clients and students who have various sexual and gender identities, and I see, and friends, and I see the struggles that they've had just because culture tells them they're bad just for being who they are, being who they feel inside. You're wrong, you're bad. We're going to shame you. We're going to threaten you with violence. That has happened and continues to happen. We're going to commit actual violence against you. That happens, continues to happen. I cannot think of anything less loving, anything less spiritual, anything less like source. Think about whether you believe in God or source or the universe, or you think that the universe was created by accident, or that we're living in a giant simulation, whatever it is that you believe. Think about the universe for a second. Think about the universe, whether you want to name it God or Brahman or whatever. Think about the everything there is, just for a second. I know it's hard to grasp everything there is, right? What does it do? What does the universe do? What is an observable quality of source, observable quality of the universe? Is that it holds everything without prejudice, right? It's people that impose prejudice upon it. So, there are, I don't know, millions of species of living beings just on this planet. This planet is one of who knows how many in our solar system. There are billions of stars in our galaxy. There are trillions with a T of galaxies in the known universe. The universe has space for all of it. It holds it. If we want to be more godly, spiritual, more like source, more like the universe, what do? We hold space for everything and everyone just as it is. Now, that is not to say, there's a little bit of a paradox here. That is not to say that we allow people to transgress upon our boundaries. We do not allow people to harm us. We don't have to accept behavior that is harmful, but we can accept everyone just as they are. And that's love. That is real deep spiritual love and intimacy. And if you want to take it a step further, you can celebrate our differences. You can celebrate that we're different people with different wants, needs, desires, in this body and mind. Underneath it all, we're the same, but understand that as well. But celebrate that we're different. Celebrate that we have different ideas, different values, different political views, different spiritual views, different likes and dislikes. I like peanut butter and bacon sandwiches. There, I said it. I like peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwiches. Nah, that's not everybody's cup of tea. But instead of saying, "Oh, you're disgusting," maybe say, "Oh, it's great that you found," and that wouldn't be for me, but it's great that you found that and like that. There are things that many people like that I don't like, and I don't have to take that away from them to feel okay. All right. With that, I'm gonna sign off for the day. I want to thank you all again for joining me. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, happy middle of the week. It is a beautiful, maybe I can, I close this, otherwise I'll be really backlit, but you can see what a gorgeous day it is outside here. I'll lift this up even. Look at that natural beauty out there. Oh, I'll turn this so you can see it too. Look at that out there. What a gorgeous day we have. The sky, hard to see because there's so much light pouring through, but the sky is blue, puffy clouds. It's warm. It's a beautiful day. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate all of you. And I do. And when I say, like, I always sign these off. Oh, you are always welcome, my friend. You are always welcome. We got to do lunch again. Next time, it's going to be sushi on me. So put your daring pants on, and we'll go get some sushi soon. Oh, thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate that, and I appreciate all of you. And I usually sign this off by saying my love to all of you, or I love you. And I actually, like, I really mean that. It's not just a thing that I'm saying. I love you. I hold space for you. I honor you. I honor the divine nature that is inside of every single one of you, and even people who are not tuned in. And I wish you well. You can, it doesn't matter who you are or what your background is or where you came from or your education or your spirituality or anything. You can bless everybody and every being that you come in contact with merely by intending them well and holding them in sacred space, holding sacred space for those who you come in contact with. Oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you ate a peanut butter and banana sandwich. That's amazing. How's that for coincidence? That's pretty funny. Oh, I don't know if my knowledge is vast, but I, share what I know. Share what I know. Um, but thank you so much. You're very welcome. Everybody have a great rest of your week. I will try to do another. We'll see if I'm able to. It's going to depend on a lot of things. My daughters, as is Brienne's daughter, finishing school this week. They graduate next week. Their Tomorrow is their last day of school, of public school, like after this college. Crazy, crazy. It's blowing my mind. I was talking to my daughter this morning, and she's like, "Can you believe after today I've only got one more day of school?" I'm like, "It's like a spike in my heart." I said, "I'm very proud of you. I'm very happy for you, but I still remember your first day of school, sending you off in your little Minnie Mouse backpack." So thank you for making me feel old. Yes, exactly right. 100%. Oh, peanut butter banana pancakes, man. You gotta send me a recipe for that because I would eat the heck out of that, especially with some bacon on the side. So yeah, get in touch. Send me the recipe for peanut butter banana pancakes. I bet my kids would love that as well. I think. But I love banana. I eat 2 to 3 bananas every day, like not with anything else, but I do love peanut butter banana together. But I eat a lot. I eat a lot of bananas. Oh, you've got a 12th grader too. Well, you know the pain. You know the pain. I've got two graduating at the same time. I've got twins, and they're my only children. So I'm about to become an empty nester. So good thing I have my dog and my cat to keep me company. One of my daughters is going to school pretty close by, and she has said, "I'll be home every weekend." I'm like, "Okay, you say that now, but you're going to be in college. You're going to be hanging out with your friends. She'll probably come home and do laundry, and then go hang out with her boyfriend." But I will be happy to see her. But I don't think it's going to be quite as often as she thinks it is. Anyway, love you all.